I've been selling this AI and real estate vision now for, 9, 10 years, and people told me I was crazy for the last 9. So I think the vast majority of real estate operations will be non-human based in the very near future.
We are living in a world where every major business decision, who to sell to, where to expand, what to build next, is only as good as the data behind it. But here's what most people don't realize yet. Not all data is created equal. The companies that figure that out early, they win. I'm Clara. Welcome to Conversations in Data by Techsalerator. And today I'm sitting here with someone who decided to go fix an entire industry's problem from scratch. LD Salmanson, CEO and co-founder of Cherre. Welcome.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for accepting our invitation. And I'm very excited to chat. I've done a lot of research in the past couple of weeks while we were chatting. So let's get into it. So you've built an unique path. At what point did the entrepreneur in you take over?
Yeah, I guess I've always been a bit of a builder. Ben and I started our first company when we were in high school. That went very well. I've been involved building some other companies since then, after the army and while school, and then later when we sold to Oppenheimer. And then obviously now with Cherry. I don't know what entrepreneur means. It's one of those words that almost feels hollow. I think of it more like an addiction. It's probably more like a drug in the sense that you can't stop yourself from doing it. It's probably very unhealthy in many ways. But here I am. I keep doing it. So I don't know. I guess it's a very unhealthy addiction is my best way of describing it.
That's very interesting. I hadn't heard that before, but I guess it makes sense, right? So you build something, it grows and you want to expand and then you just keep going and that definitely makes sense to me. So I appreciate your answer. And I've done a lot of research about your company, your employees. You have quite a lot of employees. What is something that about you that would surprise them, surprise your team if they heard it here for the first time?
My team, I don't think a lot would surprise me. It would surprise my team. I am abnormally direct and straightforward with everyone in the company. We're an extremely transparent organization. I'm not going to say that we're flat. 'Cause I don't think any organization is truly flat, but we definitely expect people to have a voice from day one and across the entire company. I think I sometimes come off as probably a little colder than probably I am. I'm very empathetic towards the people who work for me. I'm very passionate about the people, not just about what we do. And I think that generally, just my demeanor is always like cold to a certain degree. But I think those who work very close with me, I've seen that over the years and they know me very well.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think it's very important for you to, yes, hold yourself well. You have a cool demeanor, like you said, but at the end of the day, your employees matter. You're giving them, I think I saw that you give them the opportunity to come into the office or not, and then lots of benefits as well. And at the end of the day, those things show, right? So I feel like they would feel appreciated nonetheless, even if you're a more distant or colder leader, they still feel seen because of benefits that you may offer, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that and this is kind of more a philosophical discussion, but I think that employers often have this feeling of if my employee's at home, they're not working. And I think that means one of two things. Either you don't know how to measure an employee's output, and in which case you probably shouldn't be hiring, right? If you don't know how to measure output, that's probably a bad role. It's not defined well. Or you know how to define output, but you're not able to inspire that employee to deliver more. And that's really on you, right? If you said, well, if he was in the office, they would do way more. Well, then you're really admitting that your employee doesn't give a shit about you and they're just doing whatever the bare minimum is. Again, that's on you, right? So I think either way, if you're not able to produce a productive employee at home, it's on the employer, not on the employee. Now, I know that's a general statement. There's some roles where that's not the case, and there's some roles you have to be in the office to do. But especially for knowledge workers, I would look at our engineers and our product managers and data scientists, because those are the folks that are often hard to measure. Because it's very easy to measure folks on the sales and commercial side of the house, but on the other side of the house, often or people will often say that it's hard. I don't think it's hard. There are a lot of ways of measuring that. Those are some of my hardest working employees, and I think that we've found a good way to measure that performance in the same way as we're able to measure the hardest working performers on the commercial side. And I think that's it's incumbent on us, the managers, to be able to do that. It's not incumbent on the employees to figure that out.
Yeah. No, I completely agree with you. But let's stop talking about HR and get into a little bit more into the problem and the bet. I feel like in life we face a lot of problems and we take a lot of bets, so I'm excited to chat about this. Cherry was built to solve one of the messiest data problems out there, which is real estate. For people who don't live in this world, why is real estate data so uniquely broken?
I don't know if unique's the right word. I think there's a lot of broken data in the world. I think real estate has a few things that are slightly different than other industries. I think one is just the cycle time. So let's say I knew that something was going to happen and I wanted to show that and I would create some kind of plan to prove that's going to happen. It might take years for me to see that result. Whereas maybe if I'm in a public equity market, a high frequency trading fund, I can get a very quick feedback loop and act on it. There are a lot of it, logistics is another one where if I change a shipping route, I can see very quickly if I've added value or not. It's a lot harder to do that in real estate just because the cycles are longer and slower. So I think part of it's just a structural issue. I think it's also the case that it's a very risk averse industry. So it leads itself to people who are entrepreneurial, but risk averse entrepreneurial. I mean, it's a whole industry of people need to hold asset. They're so risk averse. It's literally the physical asset holding. And that doesn't lead itself to investing in technology platforms broadly. It's also the case that if you track kind of the evolution of some of these technology solutions over time, and the evolution of some of those real estate cycles, they didn't really align. So if you went back to the dot-com boom and bust, it happened just before 2000. And that kind of created this bad taste in the mouth for most of the real estate investors said, oh, we're happy we dodged that bullet. Good thing we didn't fall for that nonsense, right? And then in 2001, 9/11 happens in New York, which is the largest office market in the world, just decimates the industry here. And it takes a long time for things to recover. And then in 2002, 3, we have a recession. Again, not a good time to invest. There's a slight recovery period, but real estate's not excited to invest that time. There's maybe one or two companies that form and last within that time period. And that leads up into that 08, 09, again, global financial crisis, where again, the entire real estate industry just gets decimated. And it's not until about 2012, 13, the next batch of companies comes to life with, the Comstack, VTSs of the world that start to come out of that industry. And most of those disappeared. There are very, very few companies from that era that even still exist today. So the vast majority of them kind of died out. And by that point, the real estate industry is already completely siloed. You have this is part of the target operating models in real estate. Some are owner operators, some just own but don't operate. Even if I operate, it might be in one geography. So I have all these different systems that, again, I never thought of it or planned on it. It just happened. And I had these different geographies and different asset classes with different environments and a lot of siloed tools to do whatever the best in class for that market. And then as these platforms start to consolidate, also these problems are inherited. So even if I wanted to consolidate, I already have a very messy data environment. And it's not just a system problem, meaning I might have two different accounting systems, more likely 10 in some of our clients, or valuation tools, things like that. I have different definitions. So the meaning of words in different parts of the company mean very different things. I have an ontology problem. I have a master data management problem. So so there's just a lot of challenges that are inherent. And we took the position, unlike a lot of other companies, which maybe said, we'll create a standard and everybody's going to do what we do. We never thought that was a real thing. I don't believe in that concept. It sounds pretty on paper, but you can't tell people what to do. Surely not an industry like real estate where there's not, open to that. So we took the position that we inherit the world as it is. And it's our job to work within that world and try and make it a better place. No cliche. There's a great line of Maggie Gyllenhaal and The Deuce where it's like, nothing's ever cliche if it's real. And I really like it. So yeah, it's cliche, but it's also real. And I think we can change the world here. And I think we've been doing a really good job at that over the years.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I agree that you've been doing a really good job over the years as well. I've taken a look at the stats as well. Totally agree with you on that. So you were talking a little bit, between the years 1999, 2001, 2003, 2008, 9, 12. Where do you think that we stand now? Do you think that this is a good time for real estate investment?
I think it's always a good time generally for everything, right? I think it's a question of when for specific markets or specific opportunities. I think there's never been a better time to invest in technology, or there's never been a better time to generate technology firms. So to be a builder right now is a special time. It's really amazing. You can do things that were just impossible before. You can iterate fast. You can create things fast. Most of the barriers that you might have had earlier around cost or skill set, a lot of them have gone away, which is pretty remarkable. So I think that's just incredible. I think it also means that from a real estate standpoint, from the operators, investors, managers, it means that they get to try a lot of things that would have taken a lot more time to do. So now it's scary to them, but they get to play with a lot more things than they could have in the past. I think real estate investing is a very lucrative market right now. It's the core asset class, and even in office, somewhat challenged because we're trying to figure out what is we have a lot of extra supply compared to the demand since COVID. This new normal, quote unquote, looks at around maybe 50% occupancy. That's kind of the new normal. And it's going to take some time to reach a new equilibrium as, more supply comes out of the market and the demand picks up. But if you looked at new office towers, they're exploding. So there's a huge premium on new office towers. A lot of new towers being built right now. Boston Properties just inked a new one. Related's building a new one over at Hudson Yards. These are massive, beautiful new towers. Trophy assets in general. Like if you look at the MetLife building right over Grand Central. So the big law firms there just signed some massive new contracts. A Salesforce Tower here next to Bryant Park. So if you went to the premium kind of corridors, One Vanderbilt or Hudson Yards, those are all the high 200 per square foot record prices. If you look at that Midtown corridor, those record, the top buildings, those are all in the low 200s, really doing well. But then, there's a lot of C-class office buildings, low Bs that nobody wants, right? Some of those will be converted to residential if you can, although it's not as easy as people think. You take this massive floor plan, or floor plate, like, okay, this will work, and in the middle there's no light, so I don't know what to do. So they cut these squares in the middle with a quarter. It's doable, and some do. I think it's like 10 million square feet in New York City in plan for this year to be converted, which is like a record number. And last year was like 4 or 5, which is a pretty high number. Not the record, but pretty close. So I think there's a lot of supply coming out of the market, which will help. But there's a lot of just shit buildings that nobody wants, and I don't know that we have a solution for that. Some will become, I think, very experiential type places. There's a lot of, clubs coming up, which is an interesting kind of phenomenon. It's a new asset class to a certain degree. Retail is going through an evolution as we speak. Retail, surprisingly, is actually doing way better than people appreciate. Retail's been like the horrible stepchild for a long time in real estate, just because way too much built square foot or square footage, more than anywhere else in the world by far. Like Canada's number 2, but like a long way away from New York, from US. But even that's kind of doing better right now because people are looking for things to do. And if you can provide a good experience, those are working well. Grocery anchored, some of those are doing well. I'm a lot more surprised and encouraged by the way retail's performing right now than what people would expect. I think office has its challenges, and that's just a reality.
Yeah, no, definitely. Fun fact, I do own an office space in Brazil, and it's one of the shit ones. So, I've had such a difficult time renting it out. Now shout out to Mauricio who just rented it out from me. It was a tough one. But I did have a question for you about the types of clients and where they're from for Cherry. Are they mainly, US based, New York, or is it pretty global?
We're completely global. I would say we started in the US. I don't know if New York specifically, but in the US. But our clients are almost all multi-asset class, multi-geography. So I would say in the early days, it was more in the US and taking a set with, so they were based out of, US, North America with assets all around the world. But today, I would say our clients are everywhere. Europe, EMEA, Asia is a big part of our world. But still say, North America is still a bigger chunk of our clients just because that's where we started. But it's no longer the case that new clients are predominantly US based.
That's good. That's good and exciting. It's good to have global clients. Jumping into another more data focused question. So you talk a lot about the difference between data accumulation and outcome focused data utilization. What does that mean in practice for the companies that you work with?
So there's this saying that I really hate, which is data is the new oil. I really hate that statement because data is not oil in any way. Oil is worth money as you take it out of the ground. You just take it out of the ground, it's worth money as is before you even refined it. And it's actually worth money even without taking it out of the ground. You can literally buy oil in the ground and it's worth money. You don't even have to buy oil. You can just buy a plot of land that you think might have oil and you can get drilling rights for it, right? Surely as you take it from drilling rights all the way through different refinements, from heavy mazouts to like light crude oil, it has different values associated with it. But data is the exact opposite. It's more like sand. meaning it sucks. Like I come back from the beach, it's stuck in my flip flop. It's in my bathing suit and I have to take it out. It sucks. Like nobody wants sand, right? And it literally costs money to keep the data as it is. It surely costs money to get data into a position where I could use it. And I don't even know which of the sand is usable in the first place, right? So there's a bet on which sand is valuable. So it's a very different analogy, in my opinion. And I think the more data available, the more daunting it is to try and figure out what parts of those data can become glass, quote unquote, and where do I invest in those processes. And I tend to lean into places where we see pattern recognition from other realms, where I know that if I was able to do X, if this was true, I'll be able to do X, or the other way around. That allows us to be a little more focused on things. So I'll give you some examples. If I knew that I was able to accurately collect the inputs going into a model, whatever those are. And I was able to test those inputs in a reliable manner over time. And that even if I don't know the result is a better result, but I'm just able to do that, I know that that will create some type of foundation for being able to better predict results down the road. Another one might be just operational type things. So I know that I'm already reporting on certain things to the market manually in a certain way. So what if I just took that process of collecting that stand that's being collected manually? I already know they can create glass, but I'm collecting it manually. How about I just create a process of collecting that existing sand a little better? And what if I found a way that for the same cost, I could collect a little more sand around it, right? Or something like that. Well, now I have a little better environment to work with. So I think about it that way. And I think that's a framework to better test the question of, is it worth collecting this data? Because data is expensive. Is it worth storing this data? And is it worth investing in the process of exploring what can be generated out of this data? And the good news is there are a lot of better tools today to do that last part. So given the amount of given data, can I explore some things around it? Not a lot of great tools to go back to, well, how do I go and play with the data? Because you'll hear this a lot of, well, maybe we can skip all these standard LLMs. We don't have to collect and resolve the data. We just throw the LLMs and they work on top of data. It doesn't work that way. Like if you ask the question, like, what's the performance of office buildings in New York City? I would have to ask, how do you define New York City? How do you define office? Is it based on, what if you have a mixed use building? What's the threshold for reporting? Do you count ones that you have a joint venture or not? Like the questions become really iterative and you're not going to be able to have a consistent answer in LLM. It's not going to depend on your definition as an organization. It's not, you ask the same question in 2 years with a different model, you'll get a different answer. That's not quality results that you would expect in an organization. So I think there are good tools, but they have to be applied in a very different manner and they have to be applied on infrastructure that's very different than what I think sometimes people perceive.
Going back to, your ideas, your entrepreneurial side, when you first started pitching this idea to the real estate firms, what was the reaction? Did people get it? Did you get a lot of backlash?
No, it wasn't very good. I mean, I guess I think all founders have to try and figure out how to kind of give their message in a better way. We had a very strong intuition that real estate would look very similar to financial services and it would look very similar to what we see today. And I wrote this long form memo around how data was going to be really influential and be the fuel to this analogy that you're talking about to be able to power types of platforms. And we saw high frequency trading funds as a very good example of that pipeline, just data driven decision. And when we went around originally pitching that to asset managers and investors, they were very cynical. Either they didn't believe us, which I think is a fair general sentiment towards founders. But even those that believe that could potentially, that we, that had credibility of us as founders, they didn't believe that world mattered. So the investors would tell you that it's all a relationships, business, a relationship business, and that, there's no way they'll ever find anything that they don't already know about. The brokers are feeding them the deals. And if you ask an asset manager, they say, well, we're already super optimized. If there was a way to save money or do things better, we would have already, done it. And they were very, very cynical. So I think more so than other industries for sure. So I think it was very challenging in the early days and it was very much an uphill battle. It's also the case that our business is dependent on a network of other data vendors and application vendors to come together and work in a way which adds more value for the ecosystem, meaning that no one vendor alone would lose money by working with Cherre, and that everybody who chooses to work with Cherre would make more on their own, and everybody makes money together by creating a bigger pie. And today that's obvious, but it wasn't obvious back then. The feedback we received was, are you going to try and steal our data? Are you going to share it with our competitors? it was very, very hard to convince people, or even if it wasn't nefarious, like it's just going to cannibalize our existing business. So there were, and by the way, those are all legitimate fears. Right? I don't want to belittle them, but all those things happened in the industry here. Like people like to be critical about CoStar's litigious. CoStars are one of the biggest real estate data companies, and people like to be very critical of their litigious position. It's also the case that a lot of people tried to steal or actually stole data from them over the years. I mean, court cases have proven it. So if I'm sitting in their shoes and somebody like me comes over and pitches an idea, I could totally see why they're going, yeah, buddy, you're not the first person to come with an idea. Thank you. How about you fall off, right?
Yeah.
So I can definitely see why the skepticism exists. But I think once we started showing in baby steps with our clients and with them how we can make it work and make money for them, and I think once we started showing them that we're creating a rising tides, a rise of all boats, a rise of all ships kind of situation, I think everybody started falling in line. And today it's the case that most of the vendors they work with come, the vast majority come to us and look for distribution rather than the other way around. So it's been a very interesting journey there.
Yeah, definitely. And it's always the baby steps, right? So one client at a time, and then it starts networking and it creates a snowball of people that have tried the service, liked it, next. Appreciate you sharing that with me. Now, Cherry now powers the management of over $3.3 trillion in assets globally. At that scale, what does data integrity actually look like and what happens when it breaks?
I think we're like 3.7 or 8 right now or something like that. I think even more. I think we'll be above 4 this quarter already.
Congrats.
Thank you. It's massive. Think of everything as a giant knowledge graph, so everything connects together, and that means we understand things like owners and parcels and buildings and addresses and how all these things kind of connect in an intricate manner. The first question is, are these things even connected, right? So it's an entity resolution problem, which is not an easy problem to solve. Is this building the same, is this building in one system, the same building in another? Is this building today the same building that was there 5 years ago, right? It's not just a now point in time, there's a temporal aspect to it as well. So that's the first challenge we have is just connecting the data to each other is very, very complicated. And then when your question around, data integrity, I think of that as a very complex question. There's a simple question, which is, did it come out of the place that wherever it originated to where it arrived in a normal manner? I mean, did something get lost along the way? Think of like a trucking analogy. The truck left, did it lose some tomatoes along the way, right? Did the tomato that left, factory A arrive at the store the same tomato, right? Forget the number of tomatoes. Was it the same tomato or did it rot on the way, right? So there's a basic integrity of just, the pipeline itself, bringing the stuff across the truck. And then there's another question of is that what I was expecting? Meaning I bought tomatoes of, some type of species of tomatoes. That's probably not the right word. I ordered San Marzano and I got something else, right? Is it what I expected, right? I think of those as business validation rules, meaning is it the thing I expected or is it the size I expected? I ordered a certain size, but not too big and not too small. Were they in that range, right? That's a second layer of data integrity. We typically call the first one observability, meaning is it what I'm looking at what's going on? The second we typically call business validation rules. But then there's another one, which is, we talked about it briefly earlier, which is, the ontology. Right? Is the language I'm using here the same language that I mean? When I say San Marzano and you say San, or do we even mean the same thing? Because otherwise, we're not. It doesn't matter if we measure. We don't even mean the same thing. And then all things I just mentioned change over time and they drift, and I have to make sure that I'm tracking all those things. We handle all of those, and then some others that I'm not going to get too deep into. Because even if you
Mhm.
think about a model, I ask a model, the model changes over time. Do you see model drift, the test drift? There are just so many places where things change. The governance in my mind is a very fluid topic. It's never a point in time and it's never an answer. Whatever question you ask, we always ask ourselves, what is the answer based on who, from the person who's asking the question, the way they define and would think within that organization, within a point of time for a specific purpose. That's very different, right? You and I might have very different answers. I'll give you a great one. I could look at the same knowledge graph as you are. You're a debt investor, or maybe you're a great example. You're a debt investor, and I do tenant rep. So we're looking at the graph, and we're trying to unmask the owners. The asset will say, 123 LLC. I don't know what that means, but let's say we have a way to, find out what that means. Now, because I'm the retail person, I don't care if it's JP Morgan, JP Morgan Chase. I just want to find out if it's a bank, putting there on the corner. But you might say, it really matters to me because I want to know if it's JP Morgan Opportunity Fund 1 on that debt or it's JP Morgan, debt fund two, because the specific entity is the one that which might foreclose on that property or get foreclosed on. So even the same graph with the same theoretical, you and I might have different definitions of how we want to ask the question within the same organization on the same data, right? That's a more complex question to answer, and it's also a more exciting one to be able to answer, in my opinion.
Yeah, definitely. And I just had a question in my mind. So how many data engineers do you guys have at Cherry?
I don't know about data engineers specifically. I'd say our product engineering, data science kind of team is in, the 40s.
Mhm.
I would say it's another interesting question of what do we need today in this world? I think a lot of the things that we thought we would need to do manually, maybe even 6 months ago, we find that we can do today in a lot more automated fashion. So I think we could probably do a lot more, we could scale a lot more with these engineers than we did in the past. I mean, we'll still have to hire, but I think
Yeah.
a lot less compared to the work.
It's
Absolutely.
definitely a great time for technology, like you were saying in the beginning. But now let's talk about the AI, the real conversation. Cherry just launched Agent.studio, a platform that lets real estate organizations build and deploy AI agents on top of their own connected data. What's the big vision behind this?
So it's a vision we've had for a long time, which is the next iteration always of having your data connected and governed and trusted is putting it into a business context. And one place of putting it into business context is the classical dashboards, reporting, things like that. I've never liked that part of the world for many reasons, but also because nobody cares about dashboards, right? Something, it's a point in time. It's not something that is ongoing decisions are made based on. I think generally I'd like to see either some form of automation or some form of augmentation, meaning either I automate a process and I'm saving money or create or getting speed or getting I'm able to do more things. I'm able to look at more investments and whatever, something along those lines. Or it's augmentation, meaning whatever thing I was doing, I'm smarter about the way I can do that. Those are very different processes. And it used to be the case that we would focus more around automation. I think today we can focus more on augmentation. Agent Studio is just a natural continuation. So if I have all my data connected, then it connects to, I don't know how many data sources beyond Cherry, whatever you want. I want to maybe automate some of those processes here. So maybe I want to do variance analysis. So budget versus actual. I have a monthly budget. It's already connected through Cherry. I have all the actual statements coming in. I just want to ask myself something along the lines of, is it, what's the variance? What's the budget versus actual look like? And instead of having a whole army of people go and check that one by one, how about I just have an agent that said, show me all your past reports. I already have the budgets and actuals going back from here. Just show me what you've done. And I can go
Mhm.
back and learn. Right? The old Arthur Samuel example from, the mid 50s of the definition of machine learning, which is give me the result and give me the data. I'll figure out the rules, right? I don't need to tell me the rules. And let me look at that as context in a context graph and say, okay, I see that, every single month you do this thing where you take the rent, the actual performance of your rent, and you benchmark it versus the market, and you tend to use this Green Street metric. And then you say, I'm above or below, and you try and explain why you're above or below. Awesome. I see you do that every month when I submit it. So how about what I do is let me try and answer that on my own. Let me take a look and say, well, I already know that Green Street benchmark. That's just data. You don't have to go look for it. Let me just put that in there and say, oh, you're 3% above market. And let me try and explain. I see you've explained in all these different ways. Sometimes you explain, well, it's market driven because whatever. Sometimes you explain, well, the market went down, but our peers went down more. So I looked at all these different kind of archetypes, and now I say, let me try and test them all and see what happens, right? Oh, I can see now that what happened was, the market went down by 1%, but you just stayed flat. That's a good thing. So I'll say, hey, market went down by 1%. We are zero, even though we projected +1. So we're below our projections by 1%, but we're above the market by one. That's the end of the context. You decide if you want that to go automate or do you want to just have somebody push a button. Those are really good agents that actually function in the market. And we have, I don't know, maybe 300-ish agents overall that can kind of be deployed off the shelf. But you can build anything you want. One of the things that we really like is the ability that our clients can build on their own, but also our consulting partners can build. The consulting partners are just way more creative than we will ever be because they're in front of clients all day long with the hardest problems and the weirdest problems that we will never think of on our own. And they can take the system and say, oh, I don't care what you thought you want to do with Cherry. Here's something cool that we can do with it and kind of find some interesting ideas. So for us, it's a great distribution channel. They're really good partners of ours. And they can kind of tell us, hey, it'd be great if your system could do, and here's another use case we can make. And usually we can accommodate. But they're able to really get some good use cases out of it. Our smartest clients tend to want to build with us and not just go and build on their own, meaning they want to try and push those platforms as far as they can take them, and we really love to do that with them.
Yeah, definitely. I like the correlation between augmentation and automation. I think they go very hand in hand. And then when you were talking about the consultants, and talking a little bit more about my side of things and hiring for a data company as Techsalerator is and Data Sharp Group as well. We're all data companies under it. I love hiring consultants. It's just such a fun position to hire for because you can really pick their brain and see how they can solve problems. So, yeah, definitely agree that they're big assets for the company. Now, what does the data infrastructure a company needs to look like before AI actually works for them? What's the foundation besides maybe augmentation?
I think connected data at the core is really important. So having the core data systems that I use in a day to day in a single place, connected to each other, with a single ontology and meaning across the board. That's the bare minimum. It really is the bare minimum though, right? On top of that, I have to have some type of control mechanism such that that stays over time, and that I have some type of compliance mechanism that I can go back in time and say that that's true. And it's the hardest part, no doubt. So that's really the first step. Without that, nothing works. That's just the reality. And I think firms have this vision of, oh, I'll just slap some fun AI sprinkle dust on top of it and it will work. They're going to get eaten alive by those who build really strong systems. I think it's true across all industries, candidly, but it's especially true in real estate.
Yeah. No, definitely. And we were talking a little bit more about AI and how it's been changing every month, every day, every second of every day. It's hard to predict what's going to happen with it, but what's a prediction you have about AI and real estate that most people in the room would push back on right now?
I don't know. I'm not really good at being clairvoyant. I've been selling this AI and real estate vision now for, 9, 10 years, and people told me I was crazy for the last nine. So like, I think the vast majority of real estate operations will be non-human based in the very near future. I think that if you ask the practitioner, they'll tell you that they have, 10 years before they are automated out, and that the relationship business is really important, and that their judgment really matters, and the AI will never fill in the blank. I think these people are in fantasy land. These are the same people who would tell you that driverless cars weren't coming, right? It happens way faster than people appreciate. First, you have people sitting in cars and with a lot of telemetry, and then at some point you let the car do some stuff on its own. So maybe it can only drive on a straight line on its own on a dedicated lane, but then everywhere else you have a human with telemetry, and then you start letting it do a little more stuff, but then a human intervenes. So at some point you have Waymo, it just drives completely on its own. We're seeing the same thing in code right now. So you can look at platforms like Claude and Codex, maybe Cursor if it's not a fake Kimi model underneath, and who you ask. Same thing. First, you have humans writing, being tracked, autocomplete. Then you have the model filling some stuff and humans correcting and debugging until it's a completely autonomous platform. Real estate's way simpler than driving or than writing code. And if anybody thinks that this is going to be kept alive by an army of people that couldn't get hired in tech, that's not a real thing. The people at the top are very smart, but the industry is laden with mediocrity, and a lot of those people are going to be gone. And I don't think they appreciate that. And I think it'd behoove those at the top there who are those really smart people who really do understand where the value lies to stop thinking about this as something that's going to be slow and happen eventually. It's another buzz cycle, and realize this is an existential threat to their business. As they
Mhm.
don't do something immediate in the immediate future, they're just not going to survive.
Today,
On
is
that
there any
positive note,
And, do you have anything you wanna share with the audience, with me? Anything else today?
to me, this is the most exciting time to be in the industry too, right? It's like one way of looking at it is being very negative and saying, "Hey, it's destroying your world." If I'm sitting in our clients' shoes, especially in our clients' shoes, but also outside of our client base, it's probably the most exciting time to be in the industry. For the last 200 years, nothing's changed in real estate. Essentially, maybe some financing innovation, not that some building technology, right? But this is the most exciting time that it's ever been to be part of it. It means that firms can do things they couldn't do before, and that's really exciting. And if they lean in, that means that they have a way to create an angle that their peers can't. It means that whatever it is that they do well today, they can double down on in ways that are just not possible before. They can do way more with hiring less people. It means they can save costs, right? They can operate their assets at at higher margins at lower costs. I would argue that those firms that are trying to do something good, this is the best time to be part of it. It's the best time to be a founder in this space. It's the best time to be an operator or investors. I think it's a very exciting period of time. I would look at it as positive, not a negative thing, unless they choose for it to be negative.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, LD, this has been exactly the type of conversation I wanted to have with you today. It was so honest, so sharp, no fluff. So I really appreciate your time and thank you so much for being here with me in Conversations in Data. And this one's going to stick for sure.